In Greek mythology, Hermes, the son of Zeus, was imagined with winged sandals and a winged hat, symbols of his celebrated speed. Today, the French fashion house Hermes, that shares his name, is also known for its accessories. Elegant scarves, ties, and handbags, all meticulously made, but at a glacial pace. It can take years for moneyed customers to get their hands on certain Hermes handbags, a process steeped in more mythology than even the Greeks could have imagined. The craft and culture behind the brand has been preserved for nearly 200 years by one family and is seldom seen by outsiders. But this spring, we were invited to Paris to spend some time behind the silk curtains of the House of Hermes. On a rainy afternoon, we watched as Pierre-Alexis Dumas, the artistic director of Hermes, turned his discerning eye to dozens of potential scarf designs.
Mettez-vous là.
Colors and patterns displayed on what looked like the world's chicest clothesline. Hermes scarves are screened and stitched by hand. Some designs 2 years in the making.
C'est bien ça.
The only part of the process that happens quickly is this. Dumas chose the colors for next season's scarves in less than an hour.
I'm a happy man. Bravo.
Merci, Pierre-Alexis.
Voilà, look at the disaster. A mountain of hope reduced to ashes.
The House of Hermes wasn't built on silk, but rather saddles. In 1837, Thierry Hermes began selling bespoke harnesses in Paris. That led to luggage and eventually handbags. More than a century later, Hermes is a more than $200 billion luxury brand with a catalog that includes everything from ready-to-wear to jewelry and furniture. Pierre-Alexis Dumas is the 6th generation of his family to take the reins.
I think it's a wonderful way to enter the store.
He took us through a tunnel of orange boxes into 24 Faubourg in Paris, Hermes' flagship and heart for more than a century.
My grandfather worked here, and then my father worked here. When I was a child, his office just on the first floor, now it's the jewelry section.
The store is like the Louvre of luxury goods, complete with reminders to look, but don't touch. The brand's masterpieces include this $48,000 purse, and if you have money left over, this $272,000 pool table. Do you ever make a decision based on cost, budget? Like, this will be less expensive if we do it this way.
I can't work like that. I've always heard that Hermes is very costly. It's not expensive, it's costly.
What's the difference?
The cost is the actual price of making an object properly with the required level of attention so that you have an object of quality. Expensive is a product which is not delivering what it's supposed to deliver, but you've paid quite a large amount of money for it, and then it betrays you. That's expensive.
A distinctly French philosophy stitched into the DNA of Hermes. Dumas says the company has never had a marketing department. Its allure, he says, comes from a century of superb craftsmanship and serendipity. Take this trapezoid-shaped purse. In 1935, Dumas' grandfather designed the bag. It wasn't a hit. But as legend has it, 20 years later, an expecting Grace Kelly used the bag to hide her belly from peering paparazzi. Soon, women flooded Hermes, asking for what was eventually renamed the Kelly bag. Hermes scarves have been favored by American royalty and actual royalty for decades, the kind of product placement money can't buy. Even the brand's famous citrus-colored boxes, a color the company trademarked in the U.S., was a happy accident of the 1940s.
In 1946, there was shortage of everything. And when my great-uncle went to see his supplier of paper manufacturing boxes, the supplier said, "I'm sorry, we don't have that beige paper anymore."
Because of the war?
Yeah, because of the war and short supplies. And he said, "I only have that stock of that roll of orange paper that nobody wants."
Eyes light up when they see that orange.
Serendipity.
And it was serendipity that led to the pièce de résistance at Hermes, the Birkin, designed in 1984 by Dumas' father after he was seated next to British actress Jane Birkin on a flight to London.
And she told him, well, let me tell you, I'm not happy about my bag. I want something more loose with bigger handles and easy and always open when I carry it. And as she was talking, my father was very good at sketching.
He sketched it right there in that moment.
Yeah, just an idea, a bit something like that. And she said, yeah, that would be great.
It was. Today, the Birkin is the most coveted and costly handbag in the world. A Birkin retails around $9,000 and at auction can fetch upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars. But here is the surreal twist of Hermes exclusivity. Even if you can afford to buy a Birkin bag, chances are you can't. The stores typically don't have any to sell. Dumas says Hermes simply can't keep up with demand.
Somebody wants the bag. How do they get the bag?
Well, you have to walk into an Hermes store and you have to be patient.
But you know the world we live in, right? You know that if somebody has the funds and they want the bag, they want the bag now.
Yes, I have children too, and I have desires too. But I'm saying it's a long process. You go to a store, you get an appointment, you meet a salesperson, you talk about what you want. It's not available. You'll have to wait. It'll come back to you. It takes a long time. Eventually, it's going to happen.
Store managers act as gatekeepers for disciples of the brand. There are stories of years-long waiting lists for bags and waiting lists to get on the waiting list, along with whispers from Wall Street that the company is brilliantly gaming the customer.
Hermes has been accused of, creating this artificial scarcity to pump up demand. How do you respond to that?
It makes me smile that this is a diabolical marketing idea that can only come out of people obsessed with marketing. But we don't have a marketing department at Hermes. So first of all, when I heard that, I was like, what? Oh, okay, I get it. Yeah, well, no. Whatever we have, we put on the shelf and it goes.
There's not a room where you guys are holding all the bags back and saying, let's see what happens.
Maybe we should.
The simple truth, Dumas says, is that Hermes doesn't have enough artisans to build the bags, which for a century, he says, have been made from start to finish by a single craftsman.
So I always like to say that Hermes is an old lady with startup issues because we've grown so fast in such a small period. How can you grow so fast without changing what makes you strong?
How can you grow so fast without changing your values?
By training people. Training a lot of people for a profession which will be their life profession. They will finish their career at Hermes.
In 2021, the house opened a training center in leatherwork where 400 graduates a year are schooled in the art of savoir-faire, or know-how of making things by hand. That includes mastering Hermes' signature saddle stitch.
When you have a carriage which is pulled by 5 horses, you better make sure that all the equipment you're using is going to be strong. So saddle stitching techniques were not about trying to be hidden. They were about being strong and functional.
Today, it is a hallmark of the Hermes bags.
And here is a stitch.
Dumas learned to saddle stitch as a boy upstairs at the Faubourg, in the workshop where they still build saddles today. He thought it was the perfect place for a lesson.
Okay.
You're going to hold by applying gentle pressure with your legs.
With my thighs?
Yes,
Okay.
your thighs. You're going to be able to hold that little piece of leather so that your hands are free to stitch.
Okay.
With needles in both hands, you're supposed to pull a strong linen thread coated in beeswax into precise loops.
So I have to have the hands of a heart surgeon and the thighs of a professional wrestler, right?
That's a very extreme, but yes, if you manage to do that, you got a job.
Hermes says the crisscross of needles that make the knot can't be replicated by a machine and can take years to master. But those who do are typically offered positions at one of 23 leather workshops that Hermes has built in villages and towns all over France. This is one of them, in Tourne, a 3-hour drive from Paris in the French countryside. The workshop is quiet. There is no jamming of sewing machines, just artisans performing a silent dance with dueling needles. The morning we visited, we met Amandine and watched as she put the finishing touches on a Kelly, the most difficult bag to build. It starts with 30 distinct cuts of leather and can take 20 hours to complete, 4 hours for just the handle. There are no manuals or cheat sheets. Artisans rely on their training and muscle memory to make every bag.
Which bags do you know how to make?
Le Kelly, le Birkin, le Lindy, le Gypsière, le Shoulder.
That you've memorized.
She told us she started making bags at Hermes 15 years ago and went through 2 years of training.
So you're able to talk to me and do a saddle stitch at the same time?
Oui, c'est possible.
No one seems to be rushing at the workshop. The pace is leisurely. No looming clocks or quotas, just the slow pursuit of perfection. And when the bag is completed,
Do you have a special stamp you put in the bag?
Oui, nous signons notre sac.
yes, we do, she said, but it's a secret. A secret because that hidden mark of the artisan is how Hermes bags are authenticated. By creating their own pipeline of craftsmen, Hermes says they've been able to produce more of their coveted handbags than ever. Although they won't disclose the exact number, that too is a secret. This year, some customers were so exasperated by all the mystery and their years-long odyssey to secure a Birkin, they've sued Hermes. Pierre-Alexis Dumas says building something timeless takes time. He urged patience, while nearly losing it with us.
If I went to the Mercedes dealership and I said I would like that car, and they said, okay, you're going to have to wait 5 years, they'd be out of business.
Yeah, but you're talking about industrial production. You're applying your thinking structure of industrial production to craft. We're about craft. We're not machines. And we are not compromising on the quality of the way we make the bags. So if a craftsperson is not at the level, his or her bag will not go into the store.
Even if they've invested that 20 or 30 hours making it.
Yeah, I
And
understand.
there's no way of speeding it up and keeping quality.
Speed is the structuring value of the 20th century. We went from horse carriages to the internet. Are we going to be so obsessed with speed and immediate satisfaction? Maybe not. Maybe there is another form of relation to the world which is linked to patience, to taking the time of making things right. You cannot compress time at one point without compromising on quality.
Jeff Koons is one of the most prominent and polarizing art stars in the world. Perhaps you've seen one of his giant balloon dog sculptures, or the stainless steel inflatable rabbit he made that resold for $91 million a few years ago, the highest price ever paid at auction for a work by a living artist. I bought a much less expensive work of his at a charity auction about 10 years ago. His creations may look simple, but they can take decades to make, and often push the boundaries of technology and sometimes taste. Critics may scoff at times, but that's nothing new. Jeff Koons has been controversial since he first started showing his art more than 40 years ago. You'll find the largest collection of Jeff Koons' work at the Broad Museum in Los Angeles. Visiting it is like showing up at a strange children's party long after the kids have gone to bed. There's a giant painting of a party hat, a porcelain Michael Jackson and his chimp Bubbles, a kind of pop culture pietà. The Hulk even makes an appearance. The star attraction, a 10-foot-tall stainless steel balloon dog sculpture.
I believe the first piece.
Koons showed it to us after hours.
We had to make machines to make this work. They didn't exist.
It may look like it's filled with air, but Balloon Dog weighs more than a ton and took Jeff Koons 6 years to make.
I started with a balloon, and I blew it up. I twisted a balloon dog.
Did you know how to make a balloon dog?
No, I just got a little book, and I saw how you do it, so I twisted up. I probably made about 50 of them, and I made a mold of it, and then that was used to make the stainless steel pieces. Originally when I made this piece, I thought that I could make it for about $300,000, which still, that's a lot of money. but it ended up, just to create the piece, ended up costing me 1.6.
Wow.
And that was more than what I had sold the work for.
That's classic Koons. He's famous for going over budget, and his obsessive attention to detail is legendary. He spent 20 years figuring out how to turn this mass of aluminum into a 10-foot-tall pile of Play-Doh. To get these basketballs to appear suspended in air, he enlisted the help of a Nobel Prize-winning physicist. And he used more than 60,000 living flowers to create this 40-foot sculpture of a puppy. Koons often takes famous characters or artworks and plays with them, adding a gazing ball to the Mona Lisa. Or he elevates everyday things, making them larger, shinier, or surreal versions of themselves.
The rabbit's from 86.
86. Like that rabbit resold a few years ago for $91 million. He made 4 that look at first as if they're just plastic inflatables, but they're highly polished stainless steel and weigh about 150 pounds.
It's iconic because it can represent so many different things. I can think of Easter, I can think of a politician with a kind of a microphone, somebody making proclamations. I can think of a Playboy rabbit. But I think one of the most important things to me, the reason it's reflective and reflecting you, reflecting me, the viewer finishes a work of art. It's about your feelings, your experiences. It's about your potential.
Maybe you're thinking Jeff Koons sounds like a phony self-help prophet. Plenty of critics do. But he does see art as something that can help people have a personal transformation.
Art can be anything. I mean, it really can be. My personal experience of art is that you just don't have to bring anything to it other than yourself.
So your message to people is you don't need to have a thesis in art history to interact with art, and what you feel from it is valid.
It's as valid as anybody else could experience.
Why balloon dogs? Why gazing balls? An inflatable rabbit?
Memories. Around Easter time, I would see a lot of inflatable rabbits in the yards. I would see gazing balls in people's yards, in their gardens. Our neighbors who do that, I mean, how generous they are for us that we're just driving by or walking by and we can look and we can have a little awe and wonderment just for that a second. To me, they're symbols of cultural history.
Koons grew up outside York, Pennsylvania, in a rural community where you can still find gazing balls in people's yards. He has 8 children, 6 with his second wife, Justine, to whom he's been married for 21 years. They still live part-time in Pennsylvania in Koons' grandparents' house, part of an 800-acre farm where they raise horses and cows.
I think most people don't envision that this is the life you have as a world-famous artist.
Yeah. Well, I'm very involved with my work, but on the weekends and summers, holidays, this is a really important part of my life.
Koons has been drawing and painting since childhood. In 1974, while studying art in college, his mother helped him meet one of his favorite surrealist painters.
My mother called me and she said, I just saw in a magazine that Salvador Dali spends half his year in New York City at the St. Regis Hotel. And I thought, oh, okay, maybe, I'll call. And
Wait a minute, you just thought you'd call him?
I called the St. Regis. I asked for Salvador Dali's room, and they put me through. I was quite nervous, but I told him I was a fan and that I would enjoy very much to meet him. And he said, can you come to New York this weekend on Saturday? And I said, yes. He said, be in the lobby at 12 o'clock, and I'll meet you then. And he was spectacular.
It would never have occurred to me to, just call Salvador Dali at his hotel room.
I had nothing to lose,
Koons and Dali spent the afternoon together, and at the end of it, he asked the world-renowned artist to pose for this picture.
I remember he put his mustache up, and he was telling me, kid, hurry up. I can't hold this pose all day. But I left New York that evening feeling like I could do this.
After finishing school, he hitchhiked to New York and started making art in his Lower East Side apartment, buying cheap plastic inflatables and putting them on mirrors. Koons had grand ambitions, but he needed cash to realize them.
So eventually I became licensed and registered to sell commodities and mutual funds. And so, that's what I started to do to be able to make more money, to make the works.
That's not a career move a lot of artists make.
Well, I did it only that I could make enough money to make my vacuum cleaner pieces.
The vacuum cleaners he's talking about were what first got him noticed in 1980. He bought about 20 brand new vacuums and displayed them in cases with fluorescent lights. It was part of a series called The New.
I was showing them for their newness, that this was a brand new object. It was never used. You can see that it's clean, it's pristine, its lungs are pure. And there's also some sensual aspects to it too. They can
Sensual aspects?
Sensual, you have the handle and you have the bag right there. It could be looked at as masculine. Or you could look at it and say, the bag is the womb.
Art definitely is in the eye of the beholder.
What did you think of Jeff Koons as an artist when he first sort of came on the scene?
I was interested in him, and I also was kind of repulsed by him.
Robert Storr, former dean at the Yale School of Art, was a curator at the Museum of Modern Art in New York when it acquired some of Koons's vacuums in 1996.
I think some of the work is really unpleasant, but it doesn't mean it's not serious.
What's unpleasant about it?
The imagery is vulgar, okay? Now, vulgar means many things. It means of the people rather than of the elites.
So it's taking an object which the New York elites might look at and think, oh, that's tacky, that's trashy, that's something you buy in a gift shop, and it's blowing it up and making it perfect and saying that this has value?
It has meaning, not necessarily value, but it has meaning.
What is the message of that?
The message is that it is there to be embraced, that it is not to be mocked, that one should not be smugly sure of one's own taste to the point of denying the possibility of other tastes.
And is he being honest about that?
I think he's being totally honest. And I think that he has made all of that fair game in a way that we have not seen since Warhol.
I come down.
Like Andy Warhol, Jeff Koons has a factory of sorts, with an assembly line of painters meticulously following his instructions, and dozens of digital assistants, sculptors, and craftsmen all over the world helping make his complex pieces, which are often inspired by very simple things.
This is like a very modern grandmother's closet.
Turns out Koons was fascinated by his grandparents' porcelain figurines as a child and has collected hundreds of them.
Where did you find this?
I found it online.
He decided to make this $150 ballerina into a multi-million-dollar 8-foot-tall marble sculpture, but it wound up taking him 12 years. First, he used a CAT scan machine to digitally map every detail of the figurine inside and out. Then it took him 5 years and the help of MIT scientists to begin translating all those details into instructions for machines to carve the sculpture. The actual carving took another 7 years.
Now the work will really progress quickly because...
We went with Koons to a workshop in Pennsylvania to check on the progress and found Ayami Aoyama and her team carefully polishing the ballerina by hand.
Do you have a sense of how many hours of work is done on a piece?
33,000 hours.
33,000 hours.
Hours for just handwork.
It must be exhausting. I mean, the level of detail and monotony and difficulty of it is incredible.
Yeah, it is like a really unique job, I would say.
I mean, that looks like a sort of a dental tool. What is this?
Yeah, that's nail polisher that, the ladies actually
Really?
use. Yeah.
You'll notice Jeff Koons isn't doing the sculpting or painting. He comes up with the ideas and sets the standards, but his artisans do the labor, which has led to criticism, including from our own Morley Safer.
So what do you say to the man?
30 years ago, Morley did a story critiquing contemporary art and likened Koons to a P.T. Barnum selling to suckers.
He doesn't actually paint or sculpt. He commissions craftsmen to do that. Or he goes shopping for basketballs and vacuum cleaners.
Is that a legitimate criticism?
It's a legitimate criticism if you look at art in a way that you're kind of want everything to be done by the artists themselves. But it becomes very limited what you can do within one life if you're being responsible for everything. It's like the production of this program right now. Anderson, if you had to be responsible for the lighting, if you had to be responsible for editing.
If I was responsible for the lighting, we wouldn't see you or myself.
But if you'd have to be responsible for everything, I mean, how many programs would you be able to create? I've designed, worked on the systems, so that the whole process, at the end of the day, it's as if every mark was made by myself.
At 68, Koons has reached a level of commercial success few artists ever imagined. He's helped design cars for BMW, an album cover for Lady Gaga, even a super yacht.
That one angle.
And later this year, he hopes to create a permanent art exhibit on the moon. He's made 125 small stainless steel moon sculptures and mounted them on a lunar lander that'll hitch a ride aboard a SpaceX rocket.
Is there something about the atmosphere on the moon that would affect the lifespan of a work?
Yeah, almost everything. You have tremendous radiation. You have the temperature change, at least 250 degrees difference from night to day. One of the most inhospitable environments that you could imagine for a work of art.
The moon sculptures are for sale, of course, along with an NFT, or non-fungible token, which serves as digital proof your artwork is actually up there. You'll also get one of these larger moons to show off here on Earth. He won't say how much it'll cost you, but with Jeff Koons, it's a safe bet the price tag will be out of this world. Laurie Anderson is an artist whose work defies any easy description. She's a pioneer of the avant-garde, but as we learned, that doesn't begin to describe what she creates. Her work isn't sold in galleries, it's experienced by audiences who come to see her perform, singing, telling stories, and playing strange violins of her own invention. She won a Grammy for a chamber music album about Hurricane Sandy, and remains one of America's most unusual and visionary artists. We met at her largest ever U.S. exhibition at the Smithsonian's Hirshhorn Museum earlier this year. Ladies and gentlemen, Laurie Anderson. She's played electronic drums on her body and electric violins that sing and howl. For nearly 5 decades now, she's blended the beautiful and the bizarre.
Days go by.
Challenging audiences with homilies and humor.
Welcome to Difficult Listening Hour.
This is the picture.
She blurs boundaries across music, theater, dance, and film.
Oh yeah. Strange dream. This is my dream body.
It's not just audiences that have a hard time defining her work. Laurie Anderson sometimes does as well.
I used to say multimedia artist, and that was ridiculous. Yeah. So multimedia artist is so clumsy. With a gun to my head, I tell stories. And those look like paintings sometimes. They look like, songs. They look like films. They're just stories. What is a story? What is its function? How does it work? Who's telling it? To who?
Oh, Superman.
If you've heard of Laurie Anderson at all, it may be because of this 8-minute-long song she recorded back in 1980. It's eerie and somewhat unsettling, and to her surprise, it became a hit.
This was a song about how basically technology cannot save you.
I first heard it when I was 14. I just was like, what is this? And I still listen to it.
It's about a lot of things: justice, safety, power.
There's always force.
She recorded Oh Superman herself in her apartment in downtown Manhattan.
I had a lot of equipment that would loop things, so I was making a lot of vocal loops. Actually, you have to hit it right at the right spot. So they hawk it and do this. Blah, blah, blah.
This is the hand.
You say, because when love is gone, there's always justice.
Here you go. You can use a vocoder. Here we go. Go ahead.
And when justice is gone, there is always force. And when force is gone, there's always Mom. Hi, Mom. I love it.
You do that very well.
I've been listening
you got
to
the
it
job.
The song led to her groundbreaking first album, Big Science.
Well, you don't know me.
Pitchfork said listening to Laurie Anderson's first album is like sitting down with a strange form of life that has been studying us for a long time.
I'd like to meet that writer. I mean, everything is when you actually break it down, bizarre and unlikely. That's my lens, I think, unlikely.
Laurie Anderson grew up in Glen Ellen, Illinois, where she was one of 8 children. Every weekend, she played violin with the Chicago Youth Symphony and then walked across the street to the Art Institute to study painting.
And it didn't seem different to me to go like this or go like this.
It was the same thing.
Same thing. I would just, is that, or is that? Is it
playing the violin or painting?
Colorful enough? Is it cool enough? Is it adventurous enough? Is it right enough? Is it, it's just the same exact thing, all the same questions. And it was just what a hand is doing and what it's making sound over here, it's making color over here.
She came to New York in 1966 and began experimenting with music and short films. But after a while, she thought her work might be better received in Europe. You wanted to tour in Europe?
I did, yeah. I wrote to about maybe 500, let's say, art centers, saying, planning a tour in the fall. I had no tour. And would you like to be part of that?
With a couple responses, she took off for Italy. That's her in 1975, playing a violin with a tape recorder inside, playing loops so she could duet with herself.
But then when is the concert over? There's no end to a loop. So I thought I need a timing mechanism. So I wore some ice skates with their blades frozen into blocks of ice. So when I'd play until the ice started melting and cracking, and then when I began to lose my balance, I would just stop. That was it. That was the clock.
And you were doing this on the street?
Yeah. Usually in the hottest part of town, because it could take a long time to have these things, the cubes melt.
For years, she was a traveling troubadour, experimenting with sound, light, and stories.
And I've been around the block, but I don't care. I'm on a roll, I'm on a wild ride.
After the unlikely success of Oh Superman, she got an 8-record deal with Warner Brothers. Suddenly, the avant-garde artist was playing on MTV. That must have been strange, to have that kind of commercial success dangled before you.
I knew enough about the pop world to know it was extremely fickle. So I said, okay, I'm not going to be tricked by this.
A chance meeting with a rock and roll legend she'd vaguely heard of changed her life. His name was Lou Reed, and he asked her out.
And we went over to the AES convention at the Javits Center. Super geeky thing to do. We were looking at tube microphones.
So for your first date, you went to the Acoustical Society Engineering Convention. It doesn't sound very romantic.
I didn't think of it as romantic.
You didn't know it was a date?
No, I did not. He said, let's go get a coffee. I said, okay. And I was like, I kind of like this guy. We weren't really apart for 21 years after that.
Wow.
Yeah. He's my best friend.
Sometimes you'd better hang on to your emotion. Hang on to your emotion.
They shared Buddhism, Tai Chi, and boundless creativity, and finally got married in 2008. 5 years later, Lou Reed died after a long battle with liver cancer. You wrote about his death. I've never seen an expression as full of wonder as Lou's as he died. He wasn't afraid. I'd gotten to walk with him to the end of the world. Life, so beautiful, painful, and dazzling, does not get better than that.
Yeah, Lou was a person who had thought about this and had prepared himself for it and was 100% there.
Laurie Anderson still lives in the apartment they shared in the West Village, and every day walks her dog, Little Will, to the studio she's had since the 1970s. When we dropped in on her, she was rehearsing with cellist Ruben Codelli.
And you played...
Right. It's an opera she wrote about Amelia Earhart's doomed attempt to circumnavigate the globe.
She's on this crackly radio, and she's going like, I can see you, but I can't hear you. And they're going, I can hear you, but I can't see you.
She's in perpetual motion, playing with technology and images, fascinated by language and sound.
What was really fun about this? Ooh, wait.
She's working with an Australian university on an artificial intelligence program loaded with everything she's ever written, said, or sung. You can ask it a question or give it a photograph, and the algorithm creates an original poem in the words and speech pattern of Laurie Anderson.
Half of it is really terrible poetry, a quarter of it's kind of interesting, and a quarter of it is really kind of great.
To see how it works, we uploaded a photograph of my newborn son, Sebastian.
Wow. The mouth, the eye, the hand, the face. There's nowhere to go, no place to hide it. It's everywhere. Now that I'm here, I can't believe it's me. Who did this? Who are these people? Why are you here?
I'm like crying. I find this really emotional.
See, the thing is, it really shows us more that how much of ourselves we put into language. Yeah. There's a story in an ancient play.
Last year, Anderson delivered 6 virtual lectures as the Norden Professor of Poetry at Harvard.
You know, the best way to see the city is at night from the air.
Following in the footsteps of Robert Frost, Leonard Bernstein, and Toni Morrison. Not surprisingly, Anderson's lectures were very different.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, you're in the conga room.
Perhaps the closest anyone can get inside Laurie Anderson's mind is this virtual reality world she created with a collaborator in Taiwan.
It's a world that looks spatial, but it's made of words and drawings.
Whoa! It feels as though you're flying inside a work of art. You've been working with technology for 40 years now. Does it still fascinate you?
Yeah, it does. I'm still a geek. You know? I like it. I don't think I worship it.
It's not the savior that
no.
Some hope.
No. And this was said to me by a cryptologist. If you think technology is going to solve your problems, you don't understand technology and you don't understand your problems. And I like that very much because people just go, oh yeah, that's going to fix it. Really?
Laurie Anderson's largest ever U.S. exhibition is currently on display at the Smithsonian's Hirshhorn Museum on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. It's an odyssey through her singular creative life. This seems very ominous to me.
Good. There's so much flag waving these days, and it becomes quite mechanical in some ways. And I guess I'm terrified of the rise of fascism around the world, frankly.
Wow. In one room, she's painted words and images that seem to explode onto the walls and floor. It's a kind of multi-dimensional sketchbook of her thoughts, dreams, and stories. Did you map this out before you did it?
No, I should have.
New ideas are built on older works. She first came up with this concept in the 1970s.
This is called Citizens.
I've never seen anything like this. Miniature clay figures with video of people projected onto them. And they all, I feel like, want to kill me.
This one
They're all
does,
sharpening knives.
Because I think it's like, people like elves, right? And fairies.
Yeah.
So I think that's for me is the fascination of.
These are some badass fairies. I mean, from miniatures to monuments.
We didn't see the sun. We didn't see the fresh air for weeks.
In another room, another story. This one told by a giant video projection of Mohammed El-Garani, held for 7 years in Guantanamo as a teenager without charge until a judge released him.
For me, I gave this person a megaphone to say, it's your turn. What do you have to say? This is not about my opinions of what happened here. This is Mohammed El-Garani's story.
Laurie Anderson is 74 now and still conjuring up new stories and new ways to tell them.
I'm not an artist to make the world a better place. This is not my goal, at all, except like secretly.
Just very quietly, that's your goal?
Quietly, because I really love beautiful things, because it's thrilling to put your mind somewhere else and be somewhere that you could never have imagined, and then suddenly you're imagining, and then you're there. It's magic.
Almost 20 years ago, we broadcast one of the most controversial stories in our 44 years on the air. It was called Yes, But Is It Art? I was accused of being a Philistine, someone lacking the aesthetic sensibility to appreciate the challenging nature of some contemporary art. Art like Jeff Koons' floating basketballs, or another artist's dripping faucet. In those 20 years, works that I questioned, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, are now worth hundreds of millions. In fact, contemporary art has become a global commodity, just like oil or soybeans or pork bellies. And there seems to be no shortage of people wanting to speculate in it, and no shortage of billionaires willing to invest in it as a haven for their cash or love of art, or as a status symbol. And to feed those beasts, there are now art fairs virtually every weekend around the globe. And in contemporary art, none are more important than the one we went to in December. To Miami Beach, once a mere escape from the winter blues. Now one of the great contemporary art capitals of the world. The region hosts at least 30 art fairs annually, the most important of which is Art Basel. In Miami, the executive jets arrive by the swarm, more even than flit in for the Super Bowl. 50,000 people turn up, dressed up and dressed down.
Everybody's going to get in. All right, Melissa, I'm in. Where are you?
You can't tell the billionaires from the wannabes, the gawkers from the gawked at, the exhibitionists from the exhibitions. They come to celebrate the bonanza that contemporary art has become. The art market sizzles while the stock market fizzles. This is where big disposable income comes to be disposed.
I'm going to invite us to head inside just to say hello.
Inside, you'll find an upscale flea market, a shopping mall where prices start at the thousands and end in the stratosphere. There's very little sense of an aesthetic experience here, not the silence or even the suppressed hush of a gallery or museum. What you hear or imagine you hear is the cacophony of cash.
This is $750,000.
This fair seems to be about art as stuff or stuff as art. Just so much merchandise without a price tag in sight. There are some timeless gems maintaining a quiet elegance, but they're shouted off the walls by the kitsch, the cute, the clumsy, and the incomprehensible. From oversized headwear to art as performance. And of course, video art, an artist in the agonizing throes of creation. And then there's the question you've been dying to ask. How much is this stuff worth? Rather, how much does it cost?
There's a price for you, and there's a price for me, and there's a price for somebody else.
Dennis Scholl and his wife Deborah are longtime collectors, familiar with the unwritten rules of the art bazaar.
It's really what a willing buyer will pay to a willing seller in the art world. So when you go and look at a piece of art, the price is what you negotiate. There's no fixed price per se. And prices move up and prices move down very quickly in the art world, particularly with young artists.
And have you made some mistakes, or have they all been pretty...
Well, we bought 1,000 pieces of art in my life, so we've made plenty of mistakes. I mean, we have, yes. And you know what you do? You just bury them in the backyard and forget about them.
265 dealers are invited, and they're willing to spend up to $150,000 for the privilege of showing their wares. Are we such Philistine slobs that we wonder about the value of some of this? Is this art that dazzles the eye or makes us think? Do baby blue translucent bathroom fixtures prick the imagination? Does that toilet seat raise our spirits, or is it directing us to the men's room? Or is this the biggest scam since Hans Christian Andersen trotted out the emperor's new clothes? One thing's for sure, it's no joke. Look at this graph. Contemporary art sales last year totaled about $5.5 billion, and that only includes auction prices. Private sales like these art fairs could be worth billions more. Recession? What recession?
Good. Deal. Perfect. Cool. Great. I'll bill you.
The real fundamental thing is we're here to sell a lot of art.
Tim Blum, a partner in Blum & Poe, a Los Angeles gallery renowned for discovering the sharpest of cutting-edge art. Some of the art that you sell probably could be described as difficult.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I mean, we kind of specialize in that.
You have to explain to a potential buyer
Yes.
why he or she might learn to love this.
Often you do. A lot of folks are just buying, it's more like, we need one of these things because everybody's getting one.
Status.
It's a status symbol, it's a speculative mechanism.
Do you sometimes have to grit your teeth even when you're making a sale?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're very good at that. We're from Hollywood. We're we're in the acting game. Yeah, it's theater. This is all theater.
And Blum knows all the A-list collectors.
There's people that are collecting art in a very beautiful, organic, autobiographical way where the art is a part of their lifeline. And then there's the pure speculators, and then there's the people that just have so much money, and the art is the next thing on the queue.
You're appealing to the 1% as opposed to the 99%, correct?
1% and or 0.00001%.
We just bought them. Oh, you did? Just now.
Eli Broad, the 1%er of 1%ers, the collector of thousands of artworks, builder of his own museum. He's giddy with the thrill of having beaten the pack to a drawing by Kara Walker, a truly gifted young American artist. Collectors like Mr. Broad get first dibs on the really good stuff. He moved on to pick up photographs by Cindy Sherman. He was one of her first collectors.
Love Cindy and love her work.
He has good reason to love Cindy. He first bought her pictures back in 1982 for $250. Today they go for nearly $4 million. All of her subject matter is herself, in various guises. Her current retrospective at New York's Museum of Modern Art gives her work even more value. What are you looking for? For dealers, the gold standard is selling to a major museum. So when Jennifer Stockman, on the right, president of the board of the Guggenheim Foundation, along with a senior curator, Alexandra Monroe, turns up, the waters part.
If you go into this concave, let's walk in.
They, along with the dealer Barbara Gladstone, went ape over this sculpture by Anish Kapoor.
And then you also don't know, and you have no idea of depth. I mean, it's very strange. He comes right out of...
We moved on to an installation by Hege Yang, a Korean artist. This tangle of extension cords, asking price, $33,000.
We already are very committed to this artist, so I'm really excited to come and see new work by Hege. She is a perfect example of a contemporary, peripatetic, global artist. I always find some sadness in your work, something's unstable, something's unfinished, something's like never complete. It's always in the process. And I think that's sort of how we live today.
Art speak, the descriptive language of contemporary art, can seem as opaque as spilled alphabet soup.
And the art fair gives you a very good context for this because...
But a language fully understood by Jeffrey Deitch, former dealer, now director of the Los Angeles Museum of Contemporary Art. He could not resist reminding us of our report of 1993 and who had the last laugh.
In the art world, we remember very well that famous program that you did 20 years ago where it was almost a send-up of the contemporary art market.
We had a little bit of fun with it.
Yeah, sure. Okay. But I think in terms of market value, the time that we were talking, Jeff Koons was very well sold at $250,000. And as you know now, Jeff Koons' works have gone for $25 million and more.
And nearby, arguably the most powerful dealer in the art world, the famously reticent Larry Gagosian, owner of 11 galleries round the world. He reluctantly graced us with a few words of wisdom. At least say hello.
Hey, Morley.
You always look so dapper. I love it. This place has become one of the places that someone like yourself have to show at.
Yeah, for me, it's a place to sell art. I mean, it's a place to make money. You know, the art fair has become a huge part of our business.
How has China and Russia changed the art market?
It's been a huge factor. The wealth in Russia, the Middle East, and Asia, it's changed it dramatically.
Just how dramatically can be seen in this graph. In orange is the contemporary art market's performance compared to the gray, which is the S&P stock index. Much of that dramatic rise is a result of those new billionaires from China and Russia parking their money in art.
You have to tell me a little more about this, Victor.
Maria Babakova, age 26, is interested in this dealer's Gerhard Richter, a German artist who is the current rage.
It's got a lot of wall power.
She's a Russian oligarch's daughter who's spending a fortune on contemporary art.
And my painting, I'm selling it for $4.8 million, so you're getting a bargain with me today.
That's a real bargain.
I think so.
No.
Certainly a bargain if your daddy's a billionaire and you're playing in a market where the rule is there are no rules.
It's the Wild West. This is not a normal retail business. It's an unregulated, utterly bizarre place to conduct business.
The competition is great, yes?
Yeah. It's literally a multi-billion-dollar economy, the art world. So the way the business is run and the competition between dealers, between artists, is often vicious.
This is where the art trade's carefully constructed mask of Olympian high culture begins to crack, and the underside of a booming, cutthroat commodities market is revealed, one without regulation or oversight, in which price fixing and control of supply to maintain demand is both legal and commonplace.
How does this boom keep sustaining itself against all odds? It's inexplicable. I mean, it really is almost unexplainable, and we don't even, when we bring it up and start and begin to talk about it, we sort of drop the subject because it almost feels like you should just let it keep rolling.
Because it's going against what's happening elsewhere
absolutely,
in the economy.
100%.
Meanwhile, the prices rise and the band plays on, and all's well in this wonderful world. If the music stops and the bubble bursts, no big deal. The collectors are bubble-proof. It's only their mad money they're spending anyway. They'll still have the pleasure of their art, easier to look at than pork bellies. Or maybe not.